Welcome back, comic book fans. It's Rusty again with Collector Auctions, and in today's episode, we continue with my series of episodes from the 2024 Baltimore Comic-Con. In today's episode, I focused exclusively on submitting books to CGC, Blue Label and Yellow Label. Now, if you watched my last episode, you saw me take CGC witnesses around to various artists and have the book signed and witnessed by CGC witness. And then you got a little glimpse of me going back to CGC and submitting some of those books. Well, in today's episode, it is completely about my submission process, what I went through when I went to the con on day 3 of the con, about submitting all the books that I did. I've got 3 different Blue Label orders, and I've got several Yellow Label Signature Series books I put in as well. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go through all of those orders, and I'll talk about the process, and you'll get a small glimpse of some of the things that I went through. So sit back and enjoy some of the footage from day 3 at the Baltimore Comic-Con, and I'll be right back. How y'all doing? Now, as you saw, there were not a lot of people there on the floor when I got to CGC, and that was because I was one of the first people in the show on Sunday morning. As part of the VIP group, we got in a half hour early, and I showed up early enough that I was about the 15th person in line. So when I entered the show, there was nobody on the floor, and I headed right to the CGC booth. And that was the idea. Go in there and get all of your orders submitted. But I did take a slight detour, an aisle over, to see if Steve Epting was there, because quite honestly, that was going to be the last signing. The last books I needed signed were from Steve Epting, and I was going to need a witness. And that is what you saw in the previous episode, was that part of that submission process was getting Steve Epting's books signed. And I'll talk about that a little bit later, why that wasn't done already. Because at this point, all of my books have been signed, all of my books have been prepped, except for those for Steve Epting. And that's what I was going to do, was hopefully stop by his table. If he was there, I was going to go get a witness, get the book signed, and do the whole submission process all at one time. Well, he wasn't there yet because, as I said, it was 9:30 in the morning. Not hardly anybody was in there on the floor, especially the artist. So I veered back, went back over another aisle, and there was the CGC booth, and I walked right in because there was nobody there. Nobody had even set up yet. No, the CGC witnesses and the people and the reps were all there, but there were no other people submitting books. So I walked right in. They took me to a laptop, and I got busy putting in all of the orders. So what you're going to see next are some of the scenes from me submitting my books at the computer there at the CGC booth. And once those are over, I'll come back, and then we'll review all the orders that I put in, talk about all the differences and why there were so many different orders. So stay tuned, and I'll be back once again. So trust me, there was a lot more footage than what you just saw. There was a lot of me filming at the computer, but to be quite frank, it was very boring footage. It was the same footage over and over again. You cannot hardly see the scene in what I was filming. So I cut down what I showed you, but all in all, it was about a 2-hour process because I had a lot of different orders that I put in at the Baltimore Comic-Con. And you might ask, why did I not have some of these orders already submitted online to CGC before I walked in here on Sunday morning? Well, quite frankly, I was still pressing comics. Those Steve Epting books that I took in, there were several Captain America books that I was going to have him signed and witness for CGC. I was still pressing the night before. It was a final press. I thought it needed just a little bit more work. So I ran out of time the night before to put all these orders in. I guess I could have done it prior to even the show starting, but again, I was pressing and I just did not have the time. So lucky for me, there was no one there at the CGC booth. It was great. It was probably one of the most peaceful moments for me during the whole con. There was no pressure to hurry up. There was nobody else there submitting books when I got there. There were people that followed in after me, but it was never that busy. It was very quiet and it was very peaceful. Everybody just left me alone. The CGC reps left me alone. I knew what I was doing. Right to the right of me was the printer to the computer. So as I was doing my orders, I could literally finish the order, submit it, and print out the form, and then put all the books back together again. So as you saw in the footage there, you saw the bags of comics that I had submitted. Well, each order I kept in a separate bag. And what I would do is I would fill that order out, submit it, print out the order form, and then I would put that with the order in its own bag. So I'd keep that order and those comics together. And I had multiple ones of these. And I had blue label and yellow label. So it was a long, extended process. And as I said before, there were different orders that I put in. So let's talk about those orders. Let's start with the blue labels. And I had 3 different blue label orders that I put in. The first is a modern that had the custom label attached to it. And with that, I had 2 Secret Wars number 8s. And what I'll do throughout the show, because quite frankly, all of my books are at CGC, so there is no show and tell. So I will put clips of the comics right here so you guys can see which books I'm talking about. So I'm submitting 2 Secret Wars number 8s. The first, or I should say the origin of the black costume who eventually becomes Venom. And hopefully I will grade out as good as I did on the previous 2 books that I put in, the 2 previous number 8s. And I did real well on those. And just like those, I'm getting the custom label. It is the same image from Secret Wars number 8, that Spider-Man. I'm putting that on the labels on these as well. And then the last 2 books I got, it was 4 books, was Fantastic Four number 211, the first appearance of Terrax. And I might not have put a label on this one, but this was a really nice book, and I kind of felt like doing a label on some of these. And I had not done the Fantastic Four label yet, and I kind of wanted to go ahead and do it, so I added it to that book as well. And then the last book is for the PC. If it grades out as a 9.8, I got my fingers crossed on it, is a Wolverine issue number 2 from the limited series, the Frank Miller, Chris Claremont series. And I did add the Wolverine custom label to that. Unfortunately, though, guys, that image from issue number 2 was what they used to use at CGC. It's since been retired. So now they're using the John Byrne version of Wolverine. So that's the one I added. So that was a little bit, I was a little sad over that I hadn't gotten issue number 2 with that label yet. It's always cool to get the book with the exact book with the exact label up at the top. I think that's pretty cool. I kind of wish CGC would expand their labels. I think they could do really good by really just opening the door and flooding the market with a lot of different labels, and maybe even to the point where you can pick the same comic to put that label on there. I mean, that's maybe a little too extreme. But just like those Secret Wars number 8s, I wish I could have gotten that Wolverine number 2 with that label as well. So those were the blue label books that I got with the custom label. Now the next blue label was another modern order, but I didn't do the custom label on it. And it's got some killer keys in this book. It was a 13 book issue, and I came close to putting the label on some of those, but I'll talk about that as we get to the books. So first up in this was Batman the Killing Joke. Had a very nice copy of this, and I think I picked this up from Infinity Comics. And much like a lot of these are going to be from Infinity Comics, and some of these are going to be from other places like Heritage. Like the second book on here, I get Batman Harley Quinn. The Harley Quinn Joker cover, the classic Alex Ross cover right there. Again, another comic I picked up from Infinity Comics only several months ago. Square bound. Both of these books are square bound. Very nice books. I didn't do anything to them. It was a straight up submission. I have good hopes, high hopes for both of those that they'll grade out as high as I expect. Fingers crossed. Fingers are always crossed, so I guess I shouldn't keep doing that. But I felt like both of those are really good. I didn't have to do any work to them. Now, the third book in the modern order without the label, the custom label, was DC Comics Presents number 26. Of course, this is the first appearance of the Teen Titans, a book I had never had. I never had that as a kid, never even read the book. And I picked that up as well from an Infinity Comics auction much earlier this year. And I don't think it won't be a 9.8, but I still think it'll grade out into the mid 9s, hopefully a 9.2 to a 9.4. God forbid a 9.6, but I don't think it'll grade out any higher than a 9.4, but we will see on that. Next up was Marvel Spotlight number 28. This was a beautiful copy, the first solo Moon Knight story. And I picked this up last Thanksgiving at the Cards, Comics, and Collectibles, one of my LCSs, at their big Thanksgiving Day sale, or weekend sale, I should say. And it's a really nice copy. It won't be a 9.8 or anything, but I still think it'll grade out pretty high. And this book has come down in value a lot, like a lot of things. After that Moon Knight show, the market has gotten soft, especially now on Moon Knight. Now that nobody's thinking about that, but it is still a nice key comic. And I definitely want to get this graded because honestly, I put enough money into when I bought it that I felt like even getting it graded was going to add value to that, even though the value has come down. It's one of the reasons I get a lot of these books graded is to basically put that value back into them a little bit on this down market. And I'm rambling, but I could go into that a little bit about this method, about what I'm doing of buying certain books and then trying to get them graded, basically adding value to your PC or to sell, whichever. Next up was Avengers 196, and this one I actually picked up at a comic show, and it was a very nice copy. The first appearance of the Taskmaster, George Perez artwork, and this one was a very nice copy. Again, high hopes on that. After that, another classic comic, All-Star Comics number 58, the first appearance of Power Girl. Great Mike Grell cover on that book. Love the Bollywood art on the inside. It's an awesome book. This was a very nice copy. I had a couple of those here in the PC. This one I think was nicer than the other one. That's one of the reasons I submitted it in this. I think it's going to grade out higher than my other copy. So I have high hopes on that. I think I picked that up down at Heroes Aren't Hard to Find, actually at their store down in Charlotte a couple years ago. And I've been meaning to get some of these books into CGC, but sometimes I slowed down the orders last year. And so some of the books I've been picking up over the last couple of years have gotten pressed and they've been put on the side to eventually get in. And a lot of times I don't mind waiting because that gives me a chance to inspect the book again and do another press if I felt like it's necessary. There's this thing that happens after you press that you may have some reversion. The ticks may sneak back in. There's paper memory. And sometimes it's good to be able to give some time and go back and press again. But this was a very nice book. Again, I hope it hits in those mid-9s. We'll find out. Next up I felt was a pretty decent copy of Star Wars #1. And we'll see where it grades out. But honestly, I only paid $35 for that. And actually, that's what they had on the stand when I picked it up at the National Sports Collectors Convention a year ago. actually 2 years ago. Come to think of it, man, I am really behind. But it is a very decent copy. It's got some aging and some spotting on the back, so we'll see where it grades out. But for an investment of only $35, and as I said, I didn't pay quite that because I bundled it with a lot of other books at the time. So I may have been as low as $25 or $30 by the time I was done. That might be a pretty decent investment, even if does grade out a lot lower than I hope. Well, we'll see what happens. Next up was a really nice copy of Uncanny X-Men 133, the first solo Wolverine cover and kind of story as well. And this is the one that I was saying earlier that I regretted not putting in with the other custom label order. I should have done that. It was the John Byrne Wolverine, and I just was not thinking at the time, and I put it over in this order and let it go. And I think it has to do with the fact that I had 2 other X-Men books in this order, so I just kept them all together. Wasn't thinking I should have put it in for the custom label, but salve, that's the way things go. The other X-Men books I picked up or submitted was X-Men 131, the first cover appearance of Emma Frost, the White Queen, and issue 266, the first appearance of Gambit. Well, I guess, is it really anymore? I think everybody says it's the annual now, but I don't care. Everybody loves this book. It's the first cover appearance of Gambit. Isn't he on the cover on the annual too? Just real small? I don't know. But to me, this is the book to get if you're a Gambit fan. And I picked this up off of Whatnot from one of my local dealers here in the area. And it was one that I did a show about. I don't think that show is actually aired yet, but it's one of those that I talked about why I stopped ordering off of Whatnot, or at least I'm in hiatus off of Whatnot, is that no matter how good the dealer is, you don't have a chance to really examine that book, and you think you're getting this primo copy the way they go on about it, and you get it back, and all of a sudden you've got this micro tick here and there, and suddenly the book is not going to grade out where you thought, and it wasn't necessarily worth the money that you put into it. And we'll see how this one grades out. Honestly, this is one that I hope grades out to at least a 9.6 that I can flip and turn around and get my money out of it. I was not happy as I should have been with that book from this particular dealer, but we'll see how that one grades out. Now, the last 3 books in this order were all the same. It were 3 copies of The Incredible Hulk 340. This is that beautiful Todd McFarlane cover with Wolverine and the Hulk. And none of these are 9.8s, but I hope that they grade out higher than let's hope they grade out high. I just don't think it'll be a 9.8. I think they'll all do decently for what I paid for them. And to be honest, I don't even know where I got all of these at this point. I'm sure one of these or 2 of these came off of Whatnot over the last 2 years. And one of these, I think, was one of my original copies that I had submitted probably 2 years ago for a pre-screen that failed that pre-screen. One of the things that you'll see on my comics, occasionally you'll catch a glimpse of when I put up some of the comics when I do on show and tell, you'll catch glimpses of post-it notes on the back. And on the back of every comic that I order, I put a little information about the book, and I put down my pressing information on there too, if I've pressed the book and what I did to it. And it kind of keeps track of the book for me. And quite honestly, sometimes I really forget to do that. But anyway, I had 3 copies in there. And you might ask, why didn't I put those comics into the custom label order as well? Because right now they've got that exact image of Wolverine. They're using that as a label at CGC. Well, if you take a look at the label, they had to fill in the backside of Wolverine, and they just colored it black. And personally, I think it looks awful, and I decided rather than put even the John Byrne Wolverine on there, I decided, you know what, I don't have to put a label on everything. So I saved the $5 a piece, didn't put a custom label on those, and just put it in for a blue label. So guys, those are all the blue label books that I put in for moderns. But then the last Blue Label that I put in was a vintage order. And these have got some pretty big keys as well. I mean, I've put in a lot of keys at CGC. And in this order, and let's go through them quick because I know I'm going to be long-winded today talking about all these submissions. I did Marvel 2-in-1, the first issue number 1, the first ongoing thing series. I guess technically he was in the Marvel feature for 2 issues, but then that became Marvel 2-in-1, and we had an ongoing Ben Grimm series where he teamed up with different heroes and villains every week. Beautiful Gil Kane artwork there on the cover. Got that from Heritage Auctions, a very nice near mint copy. Big hope on that one, guys. Next up was a Marvel Premiere number 15 that I think will hopefully grade out higher than the 8.5 I got in my PC right now. This was a pickup from Infinity Comics a few months ago. I think this one definitely stands a chance of grading out much higher than an 8.5 that I've got. Next up was Detective Comics number 395, the first team up on Batman of Neil Adams and Denny O'Neil. Beautiful copy I got from Heritage Auctions. I'm hoping that this grades out above an 8.5. It's got some wear, it's got some ticks on the side, but it is a very clean copy other than that. Next up was from Heritage Auctions as well, was another copy of Avengers 55, the first appearance of Ultron. Now, the previous one that I had bought raw from Heritage graded out as a 9.4. I was ecstatic over that. This one, I don't think is going to quite reach that, but I think it's still pretty good. So we'll see what we do on that. Next up was another comic from Cards, Comics, and Collectibles that I mentioned before from their Thanksgiving sale a year ago. This was Shazam number 1, and beautiful copy. I have high hopes for this. We'll see how it is. It's the first appearance of Captain Marvel at DC Comics. So we'll see. We'll see. That was a very nice copy. I should have opened those books up, that book in particular, when I was at the store. It did have some yellowing, some I don't think it wasn't foxing, but what is that was called when you get some dust shadow? It had a little bit of that on the backside, so I don't know how much CGC is going to knock me for that, but I have high hopes for that. Next up, though, was my all-time personal favorite comic of every comic I submitted at CGC at the Baltimore Comic-Con. It is 4-Color 189. This is the second appearance of Scrooge McDuck, as well as the very first Carl Barks cover. To me, it is a Grail level book, and I've seen Rawls out there at antique shops and malls and stores for a lot of money. I paid a good penny for this on Infinity Auctions. I won it in one of their auctions for a lot less than what I was seeing it at any of the LCSs, and I think it's in really nice shape. In fact, I even saw it at the National that I mentioned, the National Sports Collectors Convention 2 years ago. I almost picked up a copy. It was really rough, and I didn't think it was quite worth it, but that when I saw that book 2 years ago, it kind of put a bug up my rear wanting that book, and I almost went back to that dealer and almost went and bought it, but when it showed up on Infinity Auctions earlier this year, I made sure that I won that book, and that is a book that is definitely going to stay in my PC. A lot of these are going to get sold, but that's one of those books that I'm going to keep for myself. Now, I also picked up more books from Infinity Comics. The next two were in the same auction. It is Wonder Woman number 205 and 206. Both of them are bondage covers, and that's the value in the book. It is slight bondage covers, and both of them are really nice. I'm hoping for the best again on these. And then last was a pickup from an LCS over in Frederick, Maryland. I picked this up actually a year ago, and it is my favorite Spider-Man comic, number 122. This book is the Death of the Green Goblin. You've got great George Perez. You've got this great Gil Kane artwork with John Romita on the cover, and then Gil Kane on the inside. Love that book. It is the very first Amazing Spider-Man comic that I ever picked up off the newsstand as a kid, and I still have my original copy, beat all to hell, but I love that copy. And a couple years ago up in Philadelphia, before COVID, there was a Marvel show that was going around the country, and up at the Franklin Institute, they had this exhibition of Marvel artwork and Marvel props from the movies. And in that show was the original art to that cover. And I got to tell you, we got ready to leave that show 3 times. And as we're getting ready to walk out, I told my wife, I've got to go back and I've got to look at that art one more time. And loved it so much. At some point, I'm going to dig up the photos and maybe we do a little show, and I do a little show and tell from that show so you can see some of the amazing artwork I saw. But that Amazing Spider-Man 122 was definitely the star of the show for me, and trust me, there were some great pieces of artwork there. So guys, that is it for the Blue Label orders. Next up, we're going to be all of the Signature Series orders that I put in, the Yellow Label. So stay tuned, and I'll be right back for that.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
All right, so the rest of the orders were all Signature Series books that I had sent in, and there were several different orders in this as well. So first up was 2 books that I cracked open myself to repress. I had gotten these books back from CGC at different times from the last couple of years. I wasn't happy with the grades, and the autographs are great, but I decided to crack them open again to try to bump the grade. But while they were open, I went ahead and added another creator to the book. And first up for that was New Mutants number 87, the first appearance of Cable. I had sent this book in a year ago for the Rob Liefeld signing at CGC, and I ended up with a 9.2. Was not exactly happy with that. I felt like it was definitely better than that, and so I repressed it and took it back in, and with the idea that I was going to add Louise Simonson to that, and then pay for the CGC JSA verification on both signatures at that point. So that's what I did on that book. And then the second book, I did basically the same thing. 2 years ago here at the Baltimore Comic-Con, Jim Lee was here, and I had him sign a copy of Batman 609, the first appearance of Hush, Tommy Elliott. And I got a grade back on that. It was a 9.4, and honestly, I was not happy with that either. I could not find any defects on this book. So I cracked it open. It was my first experience cracking books open. And the idea on this one was to obviously repress it, bring it back in, and get Jeff Loeb added to it. He was at the show. So that's what I did on that one as well. I did not have that book witnessed by Jeff Loeb, but we'll talk more about him in a second as well. But on this particular book, I did not get that one witnessed. I just went ahead and paid for the verification because I was going to have to pay for the Jim Lee verification as well. So those 2 books went in with 2 on each of them, 2 verifications from JSA. So that was its own order by itself. But those weren't the only books that got cracked open. But they were the only ones that I cracked open. But the other one was a project piece that I had started at Heroes Con earlier this year down in Charlotte. I had sent 2 copies of Amazing Spider-Man 252 facsimiles to the Heroes Con, to a facilitator who got 4 different creators to sign those books and then get them graded, and then I got those books back. Both of those books were signed by Jim Shooter, Tom DeFalco, Ron Friends, and Brett Breeding. And the idea was to get those book graded and get it back in time for the Baltimore Comic-Con, where Klaus Janson, I always mispronounce his name, Klaus Janson, and I was going to crack it open at the con, take the books, and have him sign it, and then have them witness. I have a witness with me, and then resubmit them to CGC. And that's exactly what I did. In the previous episode, that's what you saw me do at the very beginning of the footage. You see me getting those books cracked open by CGC, and then you get to see me go to Klaus and get him to sign those books. That's what you saw in the previous video. So I'm not re-showing that part again today, but in today's video, I finally got to submit those books. So part of that process of getting books witnessed at CGC is this. You go to the CGC booth, you get a witness, they come with you to the creator, you give the creator the books, you get them signed, you take them back, the witness then takes the books once the ink has dried, and they're all very good about waiting for that to happen, takes the books and puts them into a secure sealed bag with an information card that tells who actually signed the book, and with their information and everything as well. And then they seal the bag, and then they give it back to you. And at some point before the end of the con, you need to take that to CGC to submit. And in today's episode, that's what I'm doing. You see me take out of the box all of these different bagged books with CGC bags. Those were all Signature Series books, the things that I got signed at the Baltimore Comic-Con. So that's what I did with these facsimiles, these Amazing Spider-Man 252s, is I added Klaus Janson to the books. Someday I hope I can add Roger Stern to them as well. But for now, this is a pretty good project piece. I'm really excited. I had 9.8s on both of those. I'm hoping it will retain, especially the one that was a foil. One was a regular cover. The other one was a foil. And you know how that picks up fingerprints. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed for that one especially, because I didn't have a chance to wipe it down and clean it or anything. When CGC broke open those cases, they put them into Signature Series bags, window bags for me. So, and that was all free of charge. They didn't charge me extra for all of that. So that was nice. I like that part. And again, I talk about that in the previous episode. So guys, definitely go check that out. So next up was going back to Jeff Loeb. Now, as I said on that issue 609 that had been previously signed by Jim Lee, I only had him sign the book. I didn't have him have a witness verify that signature. But I did have a witness there for 3 other Batman books from their Hush miniseries. I had issue number 608, the very first issue in that storyline. These were the McFarlane variant. And now it's the same cover that you'll find on the reprint of that. It's probably the more desirable Jim Lee cover on that book. And these were the ones that they put out in stores as part of a toy line from McFarlane. And I bought a bunch of these last year thinking that'd be worth something. Well, they are worth something, but there's something worth more, obviously, getting them signed. So what I did was I had the witness verify the books being signed by Jeff Loeb, and right there at the table, and I did not have any footage of this, so I apologize for that. But right, just like the previous episode, you see the witness put the books in the bags and give the bags back to me. Same thing happened here. He put the books in the bag, gave them to me, and at this point in the day, on Saturday, I literally went and got into the Jim Lee line later that afternoon. I had timed tickets for him, and the idea was to have Jim Lee sign them and have them witnessed as well. Well, that turned into a whole adventure because the Jim Lee signing was a private signing held by a facilitator at the Baltimore Comic-Con. So when I got there, the facilitator had to open up those bags, and because it's their signing, they can't just have CGC witness that. They need to have their pound of flesh as well. So I actually had to pay even more for them to verify that the book was witnessed. So it got real expensive real fast on that. So not only did I have to pay for the Jim Lee tickets, on top of that, I had to pay the facilitator that was running the signing an additional fee on every one of those books. Those 3 books that I had them crack open the bag, I had to pay that as well. But when I went into the room, and this is something, again, you'll see in one of my previous episodes where you actually see me go into the room to get Jim Lee to sign. I had him sign other books as well. I didn't have any footage of him signing the books because they actually asked me to turn the camera off. So I turned the camera off when he was signing my book, so you don't get to see that. But immediately following that, I took the books, rebagged. Well, one thing I need to add is that in any of the books that I bring in to get signed, I put them into window bags that I create myself. You see a lot of blue painter's tape protecting the edges and protecting the opening so the artist can know where to sign as well. Well, what I do is I put every individual comic that's in a window bag like that into a slightly bigger bag, usually a Silver Age bag, that will slide in, and then it will protect the autograph and it shouldn't get scuffed or anything. And then at the end, all of those books will get put into a bigger magazine-sized bag. Every book in a particular order goes in its own magazine-sized bag. That's how I kept everything separated. And if you saw the footage earlier in this episode, you saw the stack of different bags of comics, and that's what I did. Well, after I put the bags back in, or books back into the bags, I went outside, and because I was having CGC as a witness, and I'd already paid the facilitator, the CGC witness was actually sitting out there, and I went to his table instead, and he verified everything and rebagged and had the books ready for me to submit again. So that was kind of the process that happened with the Jim Lee signing. So then it leads me down to basically the last order that I put in was one that it was a yellow label, but it actually was a custom label on these. And I had one book, and you saw it in the previous episode where I got Al Milgrom to sign a beautiful copy of Amazing Spider-Man 194. He did the cover to that. It's probably one of the best pieces of artwork I've ever seen Al Milgrom do. And you got to see me get those books signed in the previous episode, but here I am. I'm finally getting ready to submit this book. So I added the New York Skyline Spider-Man label to that book. And in this same order, I had 4 copies of Thor 337 that were signed by Walt Simonson. Now, in one of my previous episodes where you just get to see me meet Walt and actually Louise as well, I didn't film that part where he signed the Thor 337s. I missed filming that. I messed up. I didn't film that part. I filmed him filming some other things, but I got him to sign 4 copies of Thor 337 that were witnessed, and those went in as well. And I got the custom Thor label, and it's the Thor, the John Buscema Thor from the Silver Surfer issue number 4. So I'm looking forward to getting that order back. I think those are going to be they're all going to do really well. None of them are, I doubt anything will be a 9.8, especially that Spider-Man. I'm hoping that Spider-Man will at least be an 8.5. We'll see. The Thor should do pretty good. I just don't think they're going to hit 9.8s. But with Walt's signature, and especially with the custom label, I think they'll do pretty good. And I think I just said that those were all the orders. The only other order that I ended up putting in was the Steve Epting order for those Captain Americas, because as soon as I was done submitting all of these orders, I immediately found a witness who was right there at the CGC booth, went over to Steve Epting, got him signed the books, got the books back, bagged from the witness. I take him right back to CGC. I mean, not even 15 minutes later, and I'm back there on the computer again, putting in that final Steve Epting order. And that's what you actually saw in the previous episode. When you see me on the computer in the previous episode, that was that particular order. And in fact, that was the last order that I put in. So this, guys, this took all morning to basically finish up, and I couldn't be happier. Right now, as of filming, this is about 2 weeks after the con. Already, every one of these orders, except for the Steve Epting order, is already in at CGC. And it's already in the works. And I'm a little concerned because we got a hurricane hitting right towards CGC in Sarasota. I'm hoping that the books and everybody there will be safe. Here I am being concerned about the books, but I hope everybody down there will be safe. But definitely you have a lot invested in these books, and luckily they're all insured. So that part is good. But God willing, everybody's safe down there. We know we've seen the destruction with the hurricane. God bless everybody that's been affected by the hurricane. Hearts go out to everybody. It's a disaster across the southeast, and especially in North Carolina, especially. But with this hurricane, as of taping, it's starting to come in on Florida, and man, things could be pretty bad down there. God willing, it won't be as bad as everything, but it does look pretty bad. So God bless everybody down there. But that was it for the whole process. And I hope you got something out of this. It's a long process. This is a long video today. definitely, if you have questions about the process, if I've missed something along the way, definitely leave me a comment in the comment section below, ask your questions, and comment on all the books that I submitted and what you think about the books I submitted, about anything in particular about this video. I'd love to hear from you. And if you guys like this kind of content, definitely hit the like, smash the subscribe, and click on that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of the episodes that I put out each and every week, Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 3 p.m. All right, guys, I'm out of here. You guys have a great day. I will see you for the next episode. We have one final Baltimore Comic-Con episode remaining, and it was I'm going to talk about it because I don't have a lot of footage, but we'll talk about it. It was my chance meeting with Steve Borak, who was the originator of the Slab Comics, the main grader with CGC. He helped found CGC, and I got a chance to talk to him before I finished up at the Baltimore Comic-Con. So we'll talk about that just a little bit as well. So stay tuned for that episode. That'll be coming up in the next day or so. So take care, guys, and remember, every comic has a story.